Hey friends, this is Brent the coach, and today we are out in my backyard because it's a crisp autumn day. The weather is just perfect. It's perfect and the lighting's not bad either. And so here we are. This video is going to be a development off of my last one, which was on the campaign of the self. And in that video, I touched on what I call the campaign of the self, which to summarize is like everything that we feel like is incomplete about ourselves that needs to be complete or fixed or rectified or apologized for or redeemed or atoned, whatever sort of completion we need out in the world. And what it's like to live outside of it, and is our greatest actualization found outside of it. So if that sounds like that would be up your alley, you can check out that video. I'm going to do a second part to it today. I'm going to develop on a few different themes. You don't need to have seen the first one first. You can do it in either order. So I suggest you just dig in, relax, and just take in the bit of information. A lot of this is, I took a vacation very recently. I went to Barcelona, and it was my first week away from work completely, and that altitude and that little bit of distance allowed me to get some new clarity on exactly what it is that I'm doing. So I'm going to start with this. So since finishing the last video and since contemplating this idea of the campaign of the self, I decided to take this insight a few notches further and see what it would be like to really completely give up on my campaign on my own self and my own life. And I did this at the risk of losing my motivation, of losing my edge. There's a little bit of this fear of like, well, what if I just become lazy, or what if I give up on all of my dreams? But there was something in me that felt compelled to really see what it's like to live beyond having a sense of campaign on my own life, having a sense of incompleteness, and to really get a sense of what that experience is and what it's like. And I would just hope and kind of pray that if I didn't like what I found, then I can always resume the campaign later and pick it back up and get back into my old way of being. But what I noticed is that this life and experience outside of the campaign of the self, it had a very familiar call to it. Every once in a while, when I feel like I'm on the brink of a new level of awakening out of my psychology, a new sort of level of spiritual or emotional or mental awakening, it always feels a little intimidating, and it always feels like I'm being drawn towards a black hole in my own mind. I find there will always be some element of my own mind that is sort of off limits or sort of an unsafe place to go. But I would feel nevertheless attracted to that environment, to that locality. And I historically, whenever I trust the black hole in my mind, that kind of open aperture where, I don't, feels unsafe, but I kind of feel attracted to it, historically, I'm moving through awakening. And so I learned to trust that aspect of spiritual awakening. I hope that makes sense. So one more time, whenever there's something that's forbidden in my own mind, but I feel attraction to it, usually that's to my own awakening. Usually it's an escape route out of an old kind of constricted way of thinking. And so that's what I recognized in this own movement. So as I went about this, I would just maybe sit somewhere, or maybe lying in bed just after waking up or just about to go to sleep, and I would pick it up like a project. It's like, okay, let's move completely outside of the campaign of the self. And as I did this, I found myself encountering sort of a wall where it became clear to me that a lot of my efforts on the level of my life, my work, my career, my meditation, my spiritual endeavors, my reading, everything that I'm doing is an attempt to get there. And I talk about this a lot in my videos, like this aspect of getting there, because it's really crucial, and it feels like something that's important to come from different angles. And you'll see me making this motion a lot with my hand. But the reality is that for me, at least, and maybe also for you, there's just this strong, intense desire to get into a new experience, to get out of this experience and get into a new experience where my dreams have come true, where my potential is actualized, or where I have all this money, or where I'm, in a bigger, fancier home, or whatever it is. There's just always some sort of desire and some sort of attempt to escape this experience and get into another one. And so I was crashing against that in a really quite physical way, where I could feel like this sort of tension building up in my body, in my mind, where it's like, oh, like I'm just trying to get there, even in my spiritual work. And so I did a radical shift in this, where I decided, or I became curious, what would it be like to just give up on this attempt to get anywhere, to get somewhere, to get there? What if I just gave up on all of that and just let this be the dead end? So approaching this sort of wall of my experience, instead of pushing through and trying to finagle a way past or through, what if I just gave up and just allowed myself to exist in this experience and make my home here? Is what I wondered. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so I gave up on all attempts to get outside of this experience, to get anywhere. And then as I did that, I noticed immediate relief. And there was tension that just left my body. And it became very apparently clear that my nervous system was starting to unwind. And I was starting to feel sort of a homeward return, like a returning home, a return to wellness. Stress was being offloaded, and it felt like I was being healed. So I thought, well, that's cool. I really like that. So let me keep doing it. So I could just over the course of my vacation in Barcelona, just like the days and hours, whenever I had a spare second, I would return to this concept of the wall. And I would just sort of surrender to it. And as I did it, it just kind of became a little bit more clear conceptually what I was doing. Because I was only kind of doing this in a very kind of opaque kind of physical way. I didn't really have a mental grasp on what was happening. I was just kind of following my body, following my physicality as I went through it. But then it became clear that my attempts to get there, our attempts to get there is, of course, a totally fruitless endeavor, because we're trying to shift out of this experience and get elsewhere, but that elsewhere is kind of sort of in our own mind. It's in our imagination. It's a place that we can never really quite fully occupy. To put it slightly different, we're trying to get from here into the future, which again is the same thing. It's sort of a mental imagined phenomenon. It's not a place you can actually go to, seeing as there's no such thing. And I mean, like, the evidence is pretty clear. I mean, it's just as much the future now as it will ever be. Like, there's no any ever arriving in the future ever. There's only just this now moment, as we all learned from The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And then in kind of a more broad point of view, there's just nowhere but here. There's just nowhere but here and now. There's nowhere to go. Like, this is it. This is literally it. And so from there, the phrase re-emerged in my mind. I'd played with this before. It's a really profound thing to say, but even more profoundly now is saying, this is it. And so part of the invitation of this video is for you to start saying aloud with me, just as we practice this together, this is it. What's powerful about this phrase is, whatever, I could ask you, what is that it that you've been searching for? What is it that you're searching for? What is it that you're seeking? What is it that you feel that you need, that you're lacking? In what way are you incomplete? So whatever that is the it that you're kind of unconsciously always waiting for, scheming for, trying to get to, where when we get there, finally everything is okay. We want to wake up out of this dream that there's this missing thing from us. And we can do that by saying, this is it. This is it. This is it. This is it. You can hammer on you can emphasize different words in different ways, because the sentence is such an end game from the perspective of the mind. The ego really doesn't like it. And if you pay attention to it, you may even notice the way your mind and your ego will contract and reject the messaging of, this is it. Imagine just saying to your mind right now, this is it. 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 Mind goes, no, 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 there must be more. What about that stuff? What about the future? Another mental experiment that you can play with yourself is to imagine if you were on death row, and you're about to face the gallows, and in the upcoming day, there are a lot of reports of people awakening out of a lot of psychological baggage when they're staring down death. Because when you're looking at death, and death is like imminent, so it's no longer like a vague thing in the future that may happen one day and you don't know when, but it's not really a problem in your present now kind of experience. When it comes into your immediate experience, you don't have future anymore. There's no more time. There's no more future. And all this stuff that all this promise and hope that you put in the future is completely gone, and all you have is now. And it's a really, really intense experience to go through, especially if you go through it willingly before death starts, knocking at your door. But then when you kind of pass through that, then you wake up out of all of the value and all of this importance that you're putting in the future, in a future moment, and you can recognize it now and access it now. And it's a waking up movement. It's waking up out of your own kind of psychological sleepfulness of like more time, later, I'll do it later, I'll get to it later. This kind of thing. So, to summarize that point, so that's a side tangent. It's like if you want to play with that sort of topic, you can ask yourself, what is it like when there's no more time? Or what's it like for there to be no time? So that's one. Another one is, this is it. Just continue repeating to yourself, this is it, this is it. So then, okay, so I kept going on with this exercise. Don't mind the dogs next door. Hope you don't mind. So I would continue to experiment with encountering this wall and noticing where I'm trying to push beyond the wall and stopping the pushing and just surrendering to myself within this wall, within this boundary. And then there's more and more healing that comes as a result. And then what it would do is it would continue to create more of a sense of stillness and presence in me, just a continued sense of just waking up out of psychology and layers of psychology. And I began to think about one of my most favorite and cherished topics that I've devoted so much of my attention to, which is the subject of productivity. Productivity, of course, being so important to me because I would put this huge value on the actualization of my potential and the actualization of our potential as a species, as a humanity, and seeing that as a major way that we'll be able to navigate these really tricky, kind of somewhat scary times and put it on our best possible path. But a problem that I've had with productivity that was starting to become highlighted and starting to come to the fore for me was that there's just a quality about the focus on productivity that feels heavy for me, that I was never able to really articulate, not ever really able to put words to, until now. The thing is with productivity is that there are varying levels of wisdom in it, where the lowest level of productivity wisdom is when we when we read books that say, who cares what you feel, just go for it, just do your best and keep expending more effort, and this sort of really macho, really aggressively kind of masculine messaging that says, like, just no matter what, push through, and just push through, and even when it hurts, keep going and push through the hurt. And all of this is a big focus on getting your stuff done, on producing your work, and making that to be more important than yourself, you, the vessel of the work. By the way, there's like sun that's kind of streaming in right now that might make things a little blurry. So, just I hope you don't mind. It's I don't really want to move, so that's what's going on. And then we move into the wiser forms of productivity. More like the study of productivity that has more wisdom sounds a little bit more like, okay, take breaks, Make sure to drink water, make sure to sleep well, be holistic with your health, don't drink too much alcohol, don't take too much drugs, have a good sense of your priorities, schedule everything appropriately, get rid of friction in your life. And so all of this is really high level productivity, and the stuff that I would talk about in previous videos and stuff that really does truly help us become more productive. But the focus on productivity itself is still the focus on producing. And there's still an emphasis on getting work done, getting your work out. And there's still a movement against your own self as you're doing it. It doesn't matter how intelligent it becomes, how wise it becomes, we're still having a discussion about how to get yourself to do the thing. And then while we're talking about how to get yourself to do the thing, there will always be some form of conflict, because we're always moving against ourselves. There's always friction, there's always tension, there's always some desire to procrastinate or delay or do things that we would consider to be wasting time instead. And what I found, man, if I'm being really, really real with you, I want to give you the real shit right now, is that it doesn't matter how good the technique is or the insight, it seems to always come apart. Like, take the Pomodoro technique. Like, most people do the Pomodoro technique, like they do it for a little while and then they stop doing it and they don't really ever get back on it ever again, or they do like much later, and it's like on and off spurts where like a little bit we're on but mostly we're off. There are some people that are able to just take the Pomodoro technique, again, just one example, and just like they work with it forever and ever, and God bless them, but as far as I can tell, they are the minority, at least for the people that I speak to anyways. Maybe they run in completely different communities. But for the people that I talk to and the people that I see, it's always like, and the stories that I hear, it's always like, I was up and then I'm off, and how do I get back on? And we just keep cycling through new ways and new things, but nothing ever really sticks. And I'm starting to wonder if it's because it's the focus on productivity itself as a way of getting ourselves to do something that we're otherwise disinclined to do. But here's what I did find, though, is that there's a whole other area of study that doesn't include that. That if we shift to this other area of study, we actually start to leave behind the concept of effort, of pushing results, of forcing results, of trying to get ourselves to do something that we're otherwise uninclined to do. And there's a total merging and a total harmony between the different aspects of self into one thing that ends up being way more productive. And yet the concept of productivity stops being relevant. And so that concept that we can focus on now is creation. And so part of me wants to call it creation. Part of me wants to call it creationism, because it's more of a sort of a bit more of a meta focus on the aspects of creation itself. So I may go back and forth between these two words, but creationism. So you don't even have to believe me, right? You can just think of a time. Just checking the time here. Okay. You can think of a time when you were being productive. So just allow a memory to surface in your mind of when you were being productive, okay? And then now think of a time when you were creating something. And you might be like, they're the same. And like they can be the same, but kind of not, because they're different things. They're different energies, different frequencies. So think, like, just call up a memory of when like you were just creating something. Now, step into the lived experience of what it was like to create that thing. Was it effortful? Was it effortless? It was probably effortless. There was maybe great movement and intensity in what you were doing, and there was great focus, right? But there was a sense of being lifted and carried by this thing. You were in the flow state with it. In fact, there's a much larger link between the flow state and creation than there is between the flow state and productivity. In fact, it's like any attempts we make to put ourselves in the flow state tend to be false and tend not to work unless we're actually in creation, whereby the flow state just comes about naturally. For example, right now, as I'm talking to you, there's a distinct lack of effort. There's some concern that I'm, being sufficiently coherent and making sense, and that this is sufficiently interesting for you, but I'm not actually trying at all. In fact, if anything, I'm putting some sort of effort on capping it so that it doesn't go too long. That's where my effort is now going. But otherwise, there is a channeling, which is the other aspect of creativity. It's like there's a link, there's sort of a link with some sort of source of wisdom beyond my own mind, which, and all of this is mostly coming through as I'm saying it to you, and I don't have any of this really pre-planned, maybe some kind of touch points. But I'm channeling wisdom from sources that I don't really know or understand. And so that is an aspect of creation as well. It's like there's a midwifing. There's a getting out of the way and just allowing something to be created through you. There's a harmonization with the Tao, which I talk a lot about in my TikTok series, which you should check out as well. So I think what would be interesting going forward is to start having more discussions on what it would mean and what it would take to shift from productivity into creation or creationism. What would it take? How would we go about it? How can we use this in order to achieve our aims? Is it possible? Can this be turned into a bunch of lessons where once we learn them, then we can go and actualize our dreams? Or does it necessarily involve giving up completely on the campaign of the self, surrendering completely to divine will, giving yourself up to the universe, saying to God, just let me be a vessel, use me as you will, I give up completely. And then that's how we find inspiration. That's how we align with creationism. And we just have to trust that all this is gonna go according to our highest fulfillment. To what extent do we have control over this? To what extent can we turn this into something that we can actually control? My suspicion, the way it kind of feels like this is going for me, is that there is a link between creation and surrender and trust. That there's something in me and something in you as we're going through this that makes us want to turn this into a lesson that can be turned into a control mechanism, which is the pitfall of all of the productivity stuff. Productivity is all here's how you can control the unfolding of your life and make sure that you're moving according to your highest actualization. That's what productivity is saying. But the actualization of your potential and you becoming the best version of yourself and you moving with the Tao is something that is just beyond control. It can't be controlled. All attempts to control create friction with it, throw you off of it, put you off of it. And so it seems that moving into this new territory that we are, there's a lack of control. We can't control it. Really know it in a way that we can turn it into a formula and understand it, do science on it. So instead, we just have to keep moving into trust. There's stuff we can do, we can remove limiting beliefs, and we can coach and mentor each other, and we can solve problems on a really practical level, and we can kind of learn and use our minds that way. The mind and the control mechanism is still relevant, but just on a more minor level, not on the meta level. So that's some stuff that's been occurring to me over the last little while, and these are overtures of upcoming videos. Please hit like if you'd like. I'd be grateful. Subscribe. If you want coaching, you can get it for $5. There's a link below. You can also access my Sustainable High-Level Productivity course, which to me is the wisest part of productivity teachings. If that's still something that you want, I might replace it with something else later, I guess, as we go through this. So get it while the getting's good. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next one.